The Frozen Empire, Antarctica's Ancient Secrets and the DNA. Beneath the ice, scientists found, when they drilled through nearly a kilometre of Antarctic ice at a site called Cooksonia, near the Transantarctic Mountains, fossilised wood fragments and leaf GK impressions from a temperate rainforest that existed on the continent approximately 52 million years ago. And that discovery is the starting point for one of the most genuinely strange stories on Earth. A story that blends confirmed geology with legends so persistent that they have never quite disappeared. Antarctica was not always a frozen continent. For most of its geological history, it was warm. Dinosaur fossils have been recovered from Antarctic rocks, including a hadrosaur found on James Ross Island. Fossil pollen, plant material, and rainforest ecosystems have been documented in sediment cores, showing a continent that, as recently as 34 million years ago, was green, forested, and biologically rich. The freezing happened gradually, driven by a combination of continental drift, as Antarctica moved toward the pole, and atmospheric changes that reduced global temperatures over millions of years. By 3 million years ago, the ice sheet that now covers 98% of the continent's surface was fully established. Underneath it, sealed from the outside world, ancient landscapes, ancient water, and ancient life have been waiting. That is the verified science, but alongside it runs a legend, circulating for centuries, that the change happened faster than geology suggests, that Antarctica was inhabited more recently than proven, and that something remains beneath the ice. The legend has no credible evidence, but the continent's real secrets are strange enough that the line between science and speculation is harder to draw than it should be. Microbiologists found, when they analysed water samples drilled from subglacial environments across Antarctica, a biological diversity that challenged assumptions about the limits of life, and a small subset of DNA sequences that could not be matched to any organism in existing scientific databases. Environmental DNA, genetic material shed into the environment by living organisms through skin cells, waste, and decay, has become one of the most powerful tools in ecological research. In Antarctic subglacial lakes and volcanic cave systems beneath the ice, eDNA analysis has revealed entire ecosystems operating in permanent darkness, extreme cold, and complete isolation from sunlight. Bacteria, archaea, fungi, and in some cases more complex organisms have been detected in environments that, until recently, were assumed to be sterile. In 2017, a team of Australian researchers led by Ceridwen Fraser published findings from Antarctic volcanic cave systems near Mount Erebus. Warm, humid tunnels melted through the glacial ice by geothermal heat. Soil samples from these caves contained DNA from plants, animals, and microorganisms. Some sequences matched mosses, nematodes, and other organisms known to exist near Antarctica's coast. Others did not match any species currently in the scientific record. The researchers were careful in their interpretation. Unmatched eDNA sequences in a novel environment can represent genuinely unknown species, degraded DNA that no longer reads cleanly, or sequencing artifacts. The finding was described as preliminary, requiring follow-up, not as evidence of unknown life. But it was the kind of result that raises real scientific questions and, in the absence of complete answers, feeds a much older set of questions about what Antarctica might be hiding. Microbiologists found, when Russian scientists finally penetrated the ice above Lake Vostok in 2012, after more than 2 decades of drilling, that the water of one of Earth's most isolated environments contained biological material that had been sealed from the surface world for an estimated 15 million years. And the DNA extracted from that water raised questions that are still being worked through today. Lake Vostok is the largest of Antarctica's approximately 400 known subglacial lakes. It sits beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice at Russia's Vostok station, the site of the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth's surface, -89 degrees Celsius in 1983. The lake is approximately the size of Lake Ontario, and its water has been isolated from the atmosphere since the ice sheet formed over it, maintained in liquid form by geothermal heat and the insulating pressure of the ice above. The DNA sequences recovered from Vostok's water included bacteria adapted to extreme cold and pressure, fungi, and traces of more complex multicellular organisms. One analysis identified sequences with similarity to a crustacean, a shrimp-like organism, which was remarkable given the extreme isolation. The finding has been debated. Some researchers attributed it to contamination during drilling. Others argued the sequences were genuine. The legend that has grown around Lake Vostok goes further than the science. The magnetic anomaly at the lake's southern end, a disturbance that geologists attribute to a large iron-rich geological formation, has been described in fringe accounts as evidence of a buried structure. Geologists say otherwise. But the lake is real, the isolation is real, and the biology is genuinely strange enough to invite speculation. Naval records declassified over several decades document the actual history of Operation High Jump, the United States Navy Antarctic expedition of 1946 and 1947, in enough detail to separate what actually happened from the elaborate mythology that has grown around it, while confirming that the expedition's real objectives were more complex than its public justifications suggested. Operation High Jump was the largest Antarctic expedition in history at that date, involving nearly 5,000 personnel, 13 ships, and 23 aircraft. Its stated purpose was scientific research and cold weather training. Its actual primary purpose, according to documents released under Freedom of Information requests, was strategic: to establish American presence before the Soviet Union could do the same, and to conduct aerial photographic surveys of as much of the continent as possible. The expedition was cut short. Planned for 6 to 8 months, it ended after approximately 8 weeks due to damage to aircraft and ships from unexpectedly severe weather and pack ice conditions that were worse than anticipated. Admiral Richard Byrd, who commanded the expedition, described the conditions honestly in his reports. The early return was a logistical and weather decision, not a mysterious retreat. Where legend diverges from the record. Stories of aerial encounters with unidentified flying objects, of battles with advanced technology, and of a hidden base established by Nazi Germany in the preceding decade, referred to as Base 211, are not supported by any declassified documentation, credible eyewitness account, or physical evidence. The German Antarctic expedition of 1938 was real, was a sovereignty mapping exercise, and produced no evidence of permanent installation. Satellite imagery found, when researchers and amateur observers began examining high-resolution photographs of Antarctica's Ellsworth Mountains, 4-sided angular peaks whose geometry so closely resembles an Egyptian pyramid that the images spread globally as apparent evidence of ancient pre-glacial civilization, and the geological explanation, while definitive, is itself a story worth telling. The peaks are real. The photographs are genuine. The formations are not man-made. They are nunataks, rocky peaks protruding through glacial ice whose angular faces have been carved by freeze-thaw erosion. Water penetrates rock cracks, freezes, expands, and fractures the surface. Acting on multiple faces over thousands of years, this process produces strikingly regular pyramidal shapes. Pyramidal nunataks exist on every glaciated continent. The Matterhorn is among the most famous. The Antarctic peaks attracted attention because the idea that pyramids exist in the most inaccessible place on Earth resonated with a pre-existing narrative about hidden ancient civilization. That narrative is not supported by geological evidence. But the pyramidal nunataks are genuinely striking in photographs, a product of the same geometric logic that erosion and human builders both apply to stone, arriving at similar forms through completely different means. The Piri-Reis map of 1513, cited as evidence that Antarctica was known before its official discovery in 1820, depicts a southern landmass, some argued, showed the Antarctic coastline without ice. Cartographic historians concluded it shows the speculative southern continent medieval geographers assumed must exist, combined with a distorted South American coastline, not Antarctica mapped with accuracy. Geneticists found, when they sequenced the complete genome of the Antarctic blackfin icefish, Chainocephalus aceratus, that this extraordinary animal had lost, over the course of approximately 77 million years of evolution in Antarctic waters, the genes required to produce hemoglobin, the protein that makes vertebrate blood red and transports oxygen throughout the body. The icefish is the only vertebrate animal on Earth known to have no functional red blood cells. It circulates a colorless, transparent blood, technically a blood plasma, through a cardiovascular system enlarged to compensate for the reduced oxygen-carrying capacity. Its heart is approximately 4 times larger relative to body size than in comparable fish. Its blood volume is 3 to 4 times higher. The cold, oxygen-rich waters of the Antarctic Ocean allow it to absorb enough dissolved oxygen directly through gills and skin to survive without the hemoglobin that all other backboned animals depend on. The genome of the icefish, published in 2019 by a team led by H. William Detrick at Northeastern University and Manfred Schartl at the University of Würzburg, revealed not just the absence of hemoglobin genes, but dozens of novel genes for managing life in near-freezing water, including antifreeze glycoproteins that prevent ice crystals from forming in its tissues. These antifreeze genes are found in other Antarctic fish and represent one of the clearest examples of convergent evolution under extreme environmental pressure. The icefish genome is a genuine biological wonder. It documents in molecular detail how an animal can lose what was assumed to be an essential biological system and replace it with a completely novel solution. And it raises legitimate scientific questions about the limits of biological adaptation. Climate scientists found, when they extracted and analyzed ice cores from Antarctica's Law Dome and Dome C drilling sites, a continuous climate record stretching back approximately 800,000 years, the most detailed and temporally extended archive of Earth's atmospheric history available, and a document that reveals the planet's climate is more variable and more vulnerable to rapid change than the geological record alone suggested. Ice cores work because snow that falls on Antarctica compresses, year by year, into layers of ice that trap the air that was present when the snow fell. Each layer contains tiny air bubbles, samples of the ancient atmosphere, along with dust particles, pollen, volcanic ash, and chemical compounds that vary with climate conditions. By drilling down through the ice and analyzing each layer, scientists can reconstruct temperature, atmospheric composition, and even wind patterns across hundreds of thousands of years. The Law Dome core record shows that atmospheric carbon dioxide has tracked closely with global temperature across 8 complete glacial cycles. During ice ages, CO2 dropped to approximately 180 parts per million. During warm interglacial periods, it rose to approximately 280 parts per million. The current concentration is above 420 parts per million, higher than at any point in the 800,000-year record. And the rate of increase is orders of magnitude faster than any natural change the cores document. The legend of Antarctica as the site of a lost civilization gains a small amount of its traction from the ice core evidence that climate can change dramatically and relatively quickly. The transition from warm interglacial to ice age can happen over thousands of years, slow by human standards, but fast by geological ones. Genomic research published across multiple journals in the past decade has established, through the study of organisms uniquely adapted to Antarctic conditions, a set of genetic mechanisms for surviving extreme cold that researchers are now examining for potential applications in medicine, agriculture, and the biological sciences. Antarctic krill, Euphausia superba, is arguably the most ecologically important animal on Earth by sheer biomass. Estimates of the total krill population in the Southern Ocean range from 300 million to 500 million metric tons. The krill genome, sequenced by a Chinese-Australian research consortium and published in 2023, is among the largest animal genomes yet recorded, approximately 48 billion base pairs, compared to the human genome's 3 billion. It contains expanded gene families associated with circadian rhythm regulation, allowing krill to manage the extreme seasonal light cycles of Antarctic waters, and cold adaptation genes that enable activity at temperatures near freezing. The Antarctic moss, Ceratodon purpureus, has been recovered from behind glacial ice and successfully revived after 1,500 years of frozen dormancy. The genetic mechanisms that allow plant cells to survive freezing without rupture, involving specific proteins that stabilize cell membranes at low temperatures, are being studied for potential use in improving the cold storage of agricultural crops and in the preservation of biological materials for medical use. The broader question that the Antarctic biology literature raises, whether organisms that have survived millions of years of evolutionary pressure in one of Earth's most extreme environments carry genetic solutions applicable to human challenges, is one of the genuine frontiers of modern genomics. Diplomatic records found in the archives of the 12 original signatory nations document the negotiation of the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 in sufficient detail to explain why the most geopolitically contentious continent on Earth has, for more than 60 years, been maintained as the world's only demilitarized zone, and why the treaty's success is more remarkable than its critics tend to acknowledge. The treaty was signed on December 1, 1959, by Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. 7 of these nations had made territorial claims on Antarctica before 1959, and several of those claims overlapped. The treaty froze all territorial claims, neither confirming nor abandoning them, and designated the continent as a zone of peaceful scientific cooperation, prohibiting military bases, weapons testing, and nuclear activity. The treaty has been accused, in conspiracy-oriented accounts, of being a cover for the concealment of discoveries that would destabilize existing power structures. The actual explanation for the treaty's restrictions is more mundane and credible. The signatory nations had competing territorial interests and no desire to fight over a continent with no indigenous population, no economically extractable resources accessible at the time, and significant value as a scientific monitoring post. The areas most restricted to visitors are research stations, which require security protocols, and ecologically sensitive zones protected under the Protocol on Environmental Protection, added in 1991. Google Earth's occasional low-resolution patches over Antarctic areas reflect the limits of satellite imagery coverage, not deliberate concealment. Glaciological research published in Nature and Science over the past decade documents a rate of Antarctic ice loss that represents a genuine transformation of the continent. And as the ice retreats, it exposes landscapes, biological material, and geological features that have been sealed from human observation for thousands or millions of years. The West Antarctic ice sheet is losing mass at an accelerating rate. The Thwaites Glacier, sometimes called the Doomsday Glacier for its sea level rise potential, is being eroded from below by warming ocean water penetrating beneath its base. If the West Antarctic ice sheet were to collapse entirely, it would raise global sea levels by approximately 3 to 5 meters, reshaping coastlines across the planet. What the melting reveals is scientifically significant in its own right, without any reference to hidden civilizations. Ancient plant material, mosses, peat deposits, even small trees, is emerging from the margins of retreating glaciers across Antarctica, along with the bones of animals that lived there in warmer periods. This biological material carries ancient DNA that documents the continent's ecological history before human records began. The legend says Antarctica is a sleeping empire, waiting to be rediscovered. The science says something different, but no less extraordinary, that it is an archive of climate, of biology, of the planet's deep past, and that warming is opening that archive at a rate and in a manner that no scientist designed and no researcher can fully control. What we find there will not be a lost civilization, but it may be something equally important, the clearest record we have of what Earth was, and a warning about what it is becoming.